Grant us, we ask, to speak, to hear, and to learn, so that our fears may be banished, our minds may become enlightened, our faith be increased, and our steps directed towards you. Amen. John's visiting reminds me, he told me I was one day older than him. And we were looking over our careers, and it's kind of scary to realize that I've been ordained now 48 years. My students asked, how old are you? And I said, there are three parts of aging. There is ancient, dirt, and pre-dirt. And I said, I'm at the and I started looking at this stuff, and it's amazing. When you get older, some things become very clear to you. And one for me is that life is not neat and orderly. Life is messy. There's just, for me, no getting around it. Life is just plain messy. Which brings me to our topic today. Forgiveness is messy. And I wish forgiveness would be very easy, and I'm sure somewhere when I was first starting out, I gave a sermon with great authority from a big pulpit, as they were in New England, about how you must forgive and all this great stuff that the young do, and it was all in black and white and all the rest of that stuff, forgiveness, and that's the way it should be, and all the rest of that. And now I'm taking a look at the prodigal son, and this is not as easy as you think it is, at least from my point of view. And it's a messy kind of parable. And it just goes to show you what happens. Now, the story is very simple. You've got a obviously very wealthy person whose son demands and wants his inheritance and takes off, and I love this Victorian phrase, to live a life of dissolute and debauched living. Don't you love that? Dissolute and debauched living, he lived wantonly. If you're not sure what that means, he was a drug addict and alcoholic, and he messed around with all kinds of, yes. And he went to South Beach and had a grand time. And got lost somewhere. They're still trying to find him. He decides, as you heard the story, that, when he ran out of money, you have a problem. Because when you're living a dissolute and debauched life, it costs money. And so when you run out of money, nobody wants anything to do with you, so he finds himself on the street, he can't eat, and he decides, I'll go back and work for my father. So he goes back, and his father sees him and says, oh, this is great, it's great to have you back. But now comes the messy part. What about the older brother? It's the typical thing to dump all over the older brother. He doesn't understand anything, the guy's a goofball, what's wrong with him? But what if we don't know the real story? What if, in fact, this is not the first time the youngest one has taken off? What if the youngest one has never shown any inclination of doing work anywhere? Also, we know that he's gone through one inheritance, but because he's come back again, he's going to have another inheritance, which means he gives him two. Meanwhile, the older one is out there working and working and working, and we feel sorry for him because obviously in all this work he's not taking time to enjoy himself. Because it says in the story, well, you didn't give me a fatted calf. Well, why didn't he on his own go say, I need to party too? So obviously he's a workaholic and hasn't enjoyed life as well as he could. He's making all this money and hasn't used it to enjoy himself. So it's messy. It's messy. And who's not to say, after all of this, there is the famous big R, relapse. And the youngest one goes off again. And the oldest one relapses into being angry and everything else. So the story is the way life is. It's messy. It's not cut and dried. It's not this, and he should have done this, and the older brother's a goat. What's wrong with him? It's messy. And it seems to me that's the whole problem with forgiveness. It's messy. It's just plain messy. And when I looked at this initially, I found that I should have paid attention to more things because I found myself in the same trap that everybody else, I think, I shouldn't say a lot of us get into, is I thought it was pretty cut and dried. But then O'Dallas has to send me some stuff, which I read, and then I put this on Facebook, and somebody on Facebook suggested I see, and when people send me stuff, I actually read it. I really do. I actually read it and see it. So there is somebody, and I'll put this in the weekly newsletter, called Sarah Montana, who had her mother shot by a neighbor, and then when he realized, I guess it was his brother was shot by a neighbor, then he realized he's left his jacket there, he comes back, the mother comes in, shoots her too, and so she has this tremendous TED thing called It's Never Too Late, The Real Risk of Forgiveness. And she said, so I watched this, and so then I read a thing by the Reverend Carl Scoville from King's Chapel, and some other things, and it turns out I have not done a lot of homework over forgiveness over the years, and I'll just parenthetically say I'm very good at forgiving others. I'm not so good at forgiving myself. Does anybody else have that problem where you're pretty good at you give but you're not too good at yourself? All right, some things, some thoughts, thanks to stuff that people sent me, and it got me really thinking. Number one, forgiving does not mean you forget. Sometimes the idea is, if you forgive somebody, it means you have to forget it. You're not going to forget stuff. You don't forget things, and you don't lay a guilt trip on somebody for that. Forgiving does not mean you forget. I think somewhere along the line, many of us, I'll say this happened to me, I was told if you forgive somebody, you have to forget it. What happens if you can't forget it? We remember more than we think we do. It's like when I had the heart transplant. Everybody said to me, don't worry about this. I know it's awful. You won't remember any of it. Ha! I remember every moment. I remember those first 3 months, however, I remember it all. Don't tell. I wish I would forgot. I haven't forgotten a thing. All right, ask anybody who's been through chemo. They'll say, oh, you won't remember. Oh, really? Sit and talk to them. Give them a chance to tell you what they remember. All right, number two, it does not mean you are in denial. Forgiving something doesn't mean you're in denial about what happened. Denial, as they'll tell you in AA, is not a river in Egypt. You ever heard that phrase? Denial is not a river in Egypt. It's a great way to remind yourself. Denial, yes, it's denial, just because something happened doesn't mean you're forgetting it happened. Number three, it does not mean you're being nice. Oh, Kenneth forgave somebody. Isn't he nice? Nonsense. Doesn't mean you're necessarily nice. Forgiving does not mean you're excusing somebody's behavior. That's another thing that gets kind of tricky. Does that mean you've excused what they've done? No. It does not mean you've excused what you've done. It does not mean you've forgotten what they've done. And it doesn't mean that you're being nice and sweet. These are just some thoughts that I read. Forgiving does not mean you are nice, obeying moral dictates. And some thoughts from our congregation. When I say obeying moral dictates, that means you have to forgive because somewhere in the Bible or somewhere in Holy Writ it says you must forgive. You don't forgive because you have to, or you're told to, I should say. Some thoughts from our congregation. You're going to love these. Forgiving someone is letting go of the pain, but not forgetting what they've done or how they made you feel. Forgiving yourself is to stop the hurt and pain. However, you try not to repeat what made you vulnerable in the first place. Interesting twist. I struggle with forgiveness. I thought it was brilliant. I love it. I would suspect everybody here has struggled with forgiveness from time to time. It keeps us human. I understand it is better for me to forgive and move on. I also know that forgiving does not mean forgetting. So I struggle with forgiveness. I think my focus has been on protection and self-preservation. These are some fascinating stuff. Another one of our members, writing from New York, forgiveness is earned and can take time. Actions speak louder than words. I remember when I was in rehab, one of the guys said to me, Kenneth, I don't want you saying or writing you're sorry to anybody. You're good at writing. You're good at speaking. You're better than most of the people here. He said, the best forgiveness you can do is remain sober for the rest of your life. That says it all. You have to do. Saying is cheap. For you, do is what counts. I hated that, but it's true. It's true. Another person writes, the reality for me was that if I was ever to, this is good now, if I was ever to have a full life, The baggage of carrying around wrong decisions and reliving the agony was never going to let me live fully. So I'm not saying I consciously embrace forgiveness as much as I chose to live. Ooh. Forgiveness is not that big, but I chose to live. I'll get to this in a minute. I believe that to forgive is to move on and let go, but for some it is hard to forget. And finally, forgiveness is a tough one, especially when it comes to myself. Is there an expiration date for forgiving oneself? Should there be? I'll answer that very quickly. No, there's no expiration date. And there shouldn't be. All right, where does this leave us then in this mess? A thought. A thought. According to Sarah, forgiveness is not about the other person. In one sense, it's about making us finally free. Free. It's about us being free. Free from pain. Free from the grief we're carrying around. Free from the anger. And free from being now the victim. Victimhood can be a curse. So when we're angry at somebody else, as somebody wrote, what I've done is, I've let them still continue to be bad because they're renting space in me. I'm still carrying the pain. I'm not free. In all of my anger, what they've done is done, but I'm the one still carrying around the hurt, the pain, the anger, and I haven't moved on, and I'm stuck in a very unhealthy... I'm not living. My life is because of something that happened there, and I need to live. I need to be me. And I need to move beyond what they did. You know, in Judaism, it's interesting. If somebody kills somebody, you can't forgive them because they killed that person. What did they do to you? What they did is they caused you pain and anger. That's what you need to work on. And if you forgive the anger and pain, then you can move on. Finally, it's not meant to be selfish. It's meant, how do I live? How do I be free and how can I go forward? Yes, this happened, but I hate to say this. Life is not nice at times. Things happen. Bad things happen to good people. A famous sermon. A famous book from a Rabbi Kushner. Bad things happen to good people. Everybody's had stuff happen to them in this room. In life. What did Hobbes say? Life is
nasty,
brutish, and short. And it happens sometimes. So when students say to me, what do you recommend? I said, stuff happens. The question is, how do you learn to land on your feet well and look forward? The key is, it happened. You can't make it go away. It happened. It's not going to disappear. How do you look forward for you? To save your life and become free at last, to become healthy. The free of the crushing, dominating power of the deed that caused you all the pain. If the brother in the prodigal son was really free, he would have embraced, that happened, that's him, that's not me, I need to go on. And I also need to learn how to play a bit myself in the prodigal son. Let me ask another thing. Are there some things you can't forgive? And I think the reality is, it's true. There are some times in life you have to say, I just can't. And you're not going to get a guilt trip from me or anybody else who's really lived life, because there are just some things that just don't budge. It's not your fault. It's not my fault. To quote my wife, it's the way it is. It's just the way it is. So, we can, then if we're going to forgive, remember it's about the old phrase, will I be free at last? Will I be free at last to go forward? Realizing that life is full of times that are mean, harsh, and nasty. People will do things that are bad, say things that are bad, and act horribly. That's the way it is. But that does not mean we have to be trapped in resentment, anger, and you know that's bad for your health. Spiritually, physically, you know that. So Sarah Montana says, then be free of the pain to live a life going forward. And do it again, and again, and again. and that makes you free. Some thoughts on forgiveness. Amen. A moment of quiet and time.